Audrey, you want to introduce yourself and tell who you're with and what you hope to get out of today's session?
Sure. Well, I'm Audrey. I'm from the Republic County Hospital in Belleville, Kansas, and have just recently taken over as our director for our healthcare foundation. So really just looking for some good tools to use as we kind of develop a little bit of a new take on our program. Yep. Initially, we were more geared toward physician recruitment and ways to entice physicians to come to our rural area. And we're kind of broadening that now and really looking at the scope of also raising funds for our hospital and major projects to also keep us as a more enticing employer and a place for patients as well. So
very good. Thank you.
We'll just be all sorts of wealth and knowledge, I'm sure, today. And just thank you for having us.
You bet. Thank you. Yvonne? You're muted.
It does it for some reason. I'll hit it and it goes right back. Sorry about that. I'm Yvonne in Salina, Kansas. I am with the newly formed nonprofit Devoya Community Development Corporation. I'm the executive director. We're beginning our strategic plan, trying to figure out which way we're going to go. For the programs, and I wanted to sit in on this class and to get a better understanding of our strategic plan as we go forward with our programming and begin a capital campaign for the projects that we've got in the works already. Before we actually had our strategic plan, we've already got a lot of programs going and in the works on a state level and also on a federal level. So the programs came before the strategic plan. So
that happens. I work with tons and tons of nonprofit startups. I've helped hundreds of people start nonprofit organizations, and it happens often.
Yes. So now it's like, okay, now let's hit the direction and get moving. So
certainly. Jamie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jamie Doss. I'm the Saline County Clerk, so I work in Saline, Kansas, and I'm just looking at ways we could implement new programs. Obviously, with anything that we do, there's always things that we need to prepare for, and so I'm just kind of trying to get ideas on maybe ways we can improve what we're already doing. So
perfect. Keegan, you want to introduce yourself and tell who you're with, what organization you're with, and what you hope to get out of today?
Sure. I'm Keegan Bailey, the Housing Director with the North Central Regional Planning Commission. And I am just looking at different avenues for us to implement training ideas for strategic planning.
Okay, very good. Laura, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. And let me get my video. I'm a little slow on this. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Laura Leite. I live in Republic. So hello, Audrey. And I am working currently as the training coordinator for this CARES grant that North Central Regional Planning Commission got to pay for all of these nice trainings across the state or in the 12 county area. And we will be offering these through the end of June. So please make sure to take advantage of this because it's not normally free. It's really good training for everyone. And appreciate Cindy putting together all of these events and recording them, so they will be on the website later for everybody to see. And I've done some strategic planning. It's always an interesting process. So excited for today.
Very good. You know, Laura's right. I can't tell you, the nonprofits that are in Sedgwick County or around Sedgwick County would love if Sedgwick County had chosen to provide some of this training for free. And I think it's great that the North Central Regional Planning Commission is offering all these trainings and paying for them, because it just opens up so many doors for the nonprofits in that 12 county region to learn so much. So I know there's other nonprofits in the state of Kansas that are a little bit envious about what's being offered. All right. Well, we will watch for some other people to hop on, but we're going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cindy Miles. And of course, I'm the president and CEO here of the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber and a certified board trainer through BoardSource. And I have been doing consulting and training for a number of years, and I love doing this work. I love to help nonprofit organizations or any organization, really. So let's talk today about creating and implementing a strategic plan. And as I think it was, now I cannot see, Yvonne, I think it was, said they had started a new nonprofit organization. They launched some programs. They didn't really have a strategic plan yet. I hear that often, that nonprofit organizations are operating without a strategic plan, and maybe they just haven't taken the time to do that. Maybe they don't know where to start. But I want to teach you a little bit about what that process looks like of creating that strategic plan, and what are some of the things that you should think about as you're creating that strategic plan, and certainly give you some ideas for implementation, because nobody wants to create a strategic plan that goes in a notebook and goes up on the shelf and is never looked at again. And I got the opportunity to work for 3 years with developing the comprehensive plan for Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita. And it was an intriguing process, certainly, but I did not want to spend 3 years of my time committed to creating that 20-year strategic plan without knowing that the city and the county were going to actually implement the things that we talked about in developing that plan. And so certainly you don't want to go through all that work either and not implement anything. So that's not going to help your organizations at all. So really the strategic planning process is really a lot about choosing what you're not going to do. And I like to talk sometimes about the clarity filter, which is a filter that if we put everything in there that we thought we could do, or that people tell us to do, or whatever, we certainly can't do all that. So it really, putting it through a clarity filter kind of helps us decide what we really should do of all the things that we could do. And I know that my board has been great over the years. I've been here almost 6 years, and they've been great over the years about telling me things that we could do and things that we should do. And I've had to come back to them and tell them, yes, but you know, what should we really be doing, and what are we really capable of doing well? So it's not only choosing what not to do, but it's also really choosing what you should do of all those things. So sometimes there can be some confusion when people bring up ideas, when your organization, different employees have ideas or whatever. Certainly our stakeholders, they come up with ideas. So there could be a lot of confusion about what are the things that we are supposed to do. And the strategic plan will help you with clarifying some of that. Does anybody else but me get lots of thoughts and ideas from other people or board members or whatever about you should do this and you should do that?
Yes, all the time, all the time. Every time they get an idea, we should do this. I'm like, find me the people and the money, and give me a plan.
Yes, yes. I had to tell my board one time when they said, we should really be doing this. This is something really important for the organization to do. And I said, okay, we can do that. What are the things that I'm currently doing would you like for me to stop doing in order to do that other work? And then they had to really think about that. They couldn't come up with anything they wanted me to stop doing. So we didn't do that thing. So strategy is really how an organization is going to meet the needs and objectives of the organization. It's really going to give you an opportunity. Strategy is really going to give you an opportunity to developing those strategies to really think about how to do things smart, how to establish of all the things that you can do, what you should do. So what should be priorities for your organization? It's going to help you look at what kind of actions you should take to get there. We'll get more into depth about that. It's certainly going to help you create a plan, something that you can follow that hopefully will keep you going in the right direction. It also helps you allocate the resources that you have. So I don't think any of us have an unlimited amount of resources that we can go out there and use, whether it's time, people, money, whatever. And it also helps us be proactive. And I don't know if any of you ever heard the old saying about if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Well, the strategic plan really helps us with planning to succeed. So I love this little quote right here by Lewis Carroll. If you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there, right? So strategic plan really is a document. It is a guiding document for an organization and kind of tells you what you should do, not only you, but other people within the organization, board members, employees, stakeholders, what an organization should do, how you plan to do that, how you plan to achieve the goals. It really is a document that also helps you to focus your priorities. And so you're not being pulled in every different direction. I also think that the strategic plan really has a huge impact on even funding for organizations. I have seen, and I don't know if any of you have seen, what's called mission drift, where organizations go after particular funding and they start doing things that really don't fall within their mission because they just want the funding from a grant or something like that. And so eventually they develop mission drift, just chasing funding for this or that. And they establish new programs or new types of services, all based on the funding and not keeping within their mission. So I think the strategic plan can help you kind of define and stay on track with what you should be doing and how you should be funding. So the things the strategic plan does not do, certainly you're thinking about the future, but it doesn't, it's not a prediction of the future. We develop our strategic plans kind of like when I work with nonprofit startups, kind of like we develop our budget. We don't always know what's going to happen in the future. We just kind of guess at. So it is a guess in a way. So it isn't going to absolutely predict the future. It's really going to guide it. It doesn't replace good leadership and judgment. So you can create a strategic plan, but it isn't going to be a replacement for those things. It's not necessarily smooth or straightforward. Sometimes you get down the road of developing a strategic plan and you're following some of those things that you've put in there, and it doesn't always work out exactly the way that you hoped it would. It is a best effort to provide guidance, but you might have a strategic plan and you're working on something and suddenly a pandemic hits. So there's that. And then we have to always remember our strategic plans are living documents. So you can update them, and you should be updating them. You can change them as you need. Some organizations go through strategic planning process every year. Some will go through it every 3 years or 5 years. In the middle of those times, they actually just go in and make changes to the document. They update the goals that they've achieved, the tasks, those types of things. And it's certainly okay to do that. You don't necessarily need to start from scratch every year, every 3 years. You can certainly just make those updates to that strategic plan. How many of you currently have a strategic plan in place, or what's the most recent strategic plan you have in place, or you don't have one at all?
We have one. right now, it's just with moving forward with the expansion of the SNAP program throughout the state of Kansas.
Yes.
But that's just for the program. That's not for the organization as a whole.
Okay. What about the rest of you? Where are you at in this process?
This is Audrey. Mostly just looking to kind of create a strategic plan when it comes to fundraising for specific upcoming projects that we will have going, since we're kind of changing our mission altogether.
Okay.
It's just a lot in the beginning stage.
Oh, that is a lot. Yeah. Anybody else? Susan, I
This
didn't.
is Jamie.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, the clerk prior to me had one, but it's very outdated, and there's been so many changes in a lot of our processes and things that I'm pretty much kind of starting from scratch for us.
Okay. And do you expect, do all of you expect, if you have a strategic plan in place, have you thought at all about whether you would want to go through that process every year or every 3 years, or how long you would want your strategic plan to reach out to? People used to do like 10-year plans or whatever. And I know I worked on a 20-year plan with the city and county, but that is city and county government, and they do update every year. But have any thoughts about that?
We have a 1-year projection right now.
Okay.
Since this program is new that we're working with the state of Kansas on.
Yes.
So it's a pilot program. So right now this is what we want to accomplish by the end of year 1. So
yes. Good.
But, it's a start.
Yes, it is a start. Susan, I didn't get a chance to have you introduce yourself. Would you mind to introduce yourself real quick and tell who you're with and what you hope to get out of today?
Sure. This is Susan Penka, and my apologies for coming on late.
No worries.
Had to set this up, set Zoom up on my phone, and was having some technical issues. Anyway, I work for the Kansas Small Business Development Center.
Oh, okay.
I cover 12 counties in north central Kansas. And so I help businesses with, developing their financial projections, with business plans, and just a variety of other business, related things. I haven't had an opportunity to do any sort of strategic planning. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about it.
Perfect. I had somebody on, I don't know, last week or so that was learning about nonprofit startup, I think from the SBDC. Would that be right?
Yes, actually, that was me.
Was it you? I couldn't remember whether it was you or not. I need to come visit with you all. I'd love to come visit with you all. Find out what you're doing up your way.
That would be great. I'd love to have you.
Moving on. So strategic planning for nonprofit organizations, it's not the role of just the executive director. It's not the role of just the board, although I've heard of boards who go out and create a strategic plan and don't involve the executive director. It is a joint effort between both the executive director and the board. Sometimes it can also involve other staff within the organizations. When I do strategic planning for nonprofit organizations, if there are key people within the organization that really would have a lot of input into that strategic plan, need to be there through that process, certainly I encourage them to be engaged as well. The interesting thing about involving the board is the board has a higher level view of what's going on, but they don't have that real deep insight into what's going on in an organization because they're not there on a day-to-day basis. So your program manager or director or somebody else, your fundraising professional, your development director, they've got a lot different insight than what the board members have. And so, there might be other people within the organization that need to be involved. So I certainly wouldn't want that to be just executive director and board. I certainly want you to think about who else should be involved in that process. You do need to think about what's the best way for the process of strategic planning to be facilitated. It really is not best practice to have the executive director or a board member or even somebody within your organization to actually facilitate that process. It's better to have somebody that's from outside of the organization that can ask some tough questions, that can provide some guidance. And not only that, but that allows everybody that's involved with the organization to participate in the strategic planning process. That can be difficult if you have somebody internally that's facilitating that. I've done that with a couple of boards that I've been involved with because they couldn't find anybody, and it can be done, but I just don't think it's a really good process. So finding somebody that has experience in facilitating that strategic planning process is best practice. And back to that, identifying who should be included in the process. So if you've got particular staff that it might be smart to engage them, then certainly engage them. And I mentioned staff, I mentioned board, I mentioned the executive directors. Sometimes it might be good to engage some other stakeholders. So maybe there's a particular client that you serve that you want to engage in that process. The actual strategic planning process. Certainly you can gather information from other stakeholders through your SWOT analysis, which we'll discuss later. But it really is important to think through who it does make the most sense to be involved in that actual process. And then you need to identify what is it that you want really to get out of the plan, and not only what you want to get out of the plan, but what time frame do you want that plan to cover? And generally people used to set plans for 10 years or 15 years. Now, if they set one for 1 year, 3 year, 5 years is probably the most. And you can look at within that strategic planning process, certainly setting some goals that are 1 year goals. Certainly setting some goals that are 5 year goals. So that really is up to what your organization thinks that, what time frame they want to cover. I think it's nice to have some bigger goal that helps you get closer to what the vision is of the organization. That is a longer term goal. So it gives you an opportunity to think about long term. But I think certainly having those short-term goals is very important as well. You also need to think about how much time you need for planning. So you're gonna maybe think this is crazy, but I see organizations that want to do a strategic plan in 2 hours. I facilitate strategic planning. I've never been able to put together a good strategic plan in 2 hours. You just can't get through all the discussion of everything that you need to discuss. I've also seen organizations that have taken 6 or 9 months to do their strategic plan. And I think some of that depends on the size of an organization. Maybe the bigger the organization, the longer it could take to put that strategic plan together. When I worked for Butler Community College in their marketing department, certainly as the college developed strategic plans, we're talking about thousands of employees, different 89, I think it was, different programs. So there's a lot to think about in regards to the strategic planning process. That's much different than if you've got an organization and you've got 5 employees. If you take 6 months or 9 months to put a strategic plan together and you've got 5 employees, that's really a pretty long time to put a strategic plan together. On the other hand, as I do strategic planning, I do have nonprofit organizations that say, well, my board is willing to spend 4 hours with you doing strategic planning. And I tell them that's the very minimum that I can take facilitating strategic planning. And if I can have at least 8, that's even better. But whatever that time is, you really need to have that discussion and think about not only the time that it's going to take, but the willingness of the people that are going to be involved to commit and their availability to commit. Any questions about that? All righty. You guys certainly can pop in and ask any questions or make any comments. I don't want to just be a talking head all the time. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the steps to strategic planning. So this is an ongoing cycle on an ongoing basis. Your first step, if you were just starting, would really be to assess the organization and what the organization is currently doing. That would include getting, different feedback about where the organization's at. Certainly reviewing, and it says develop vision and mission. Certainly you probably have those in place, but reviewing that vision and mission for your organization would be the second step, and making sure that whatever it is that you're doing, your vision and your mission are still applicable to the organization. I know I work with an organization. It's a very small organization. They don't have any paid staff. And they started out their organization with a certain mission, but that's really not the work that they do. So we're looking at how do we update the mission for that organization. And then the next thing is going to be assessing the environment. And that's generally done through a SWOT analysis, which could be conducted again, internally, externally. We'll talk more about that as I have a slide that talks specifically about the SWOT analysis. Agreeing on priorities, that's setting goals, strategies, those types of things. Getting it all written down, because you've got to have that document that people can continue to see. And of course, that implementation process is huge. There's no sense of creating a strategic plan if you're not going to implement it. And then monitoring and evaluating the progress that you're making on those goals, the strategies that you're working on, the task. And then you start the process all over again. And actually you kind of keep that process going on when you start strategic planning, or when it's time to renew that strategic plan. So some of the keys to really being effective at strategic planning is you've got to focus on the issues that are really the biggest issues within the organization. And so, I don't know, here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, we're working on getting some of our furniture replaced. And while that's important, it certainly isn't one of the most important issues that we're going to focus on here at the Nonprofit Chamber. It does impact our branding, I guess, what people might walk into our offices and think about how professional of an organization that we are. But it certainly is not going to be one of the most important things that we focus on. So you've got to figure out what are the things that really will impact your organization the most. Furniture for us is not that. You've got to be willing to ask really hard questions. You've got to be willing to open up and be open and honest about what's going on within the organization. And not only do you have to be willing to ask those tough questions, you also have to be willing to listen to the response to some of those tough questions. I know I work with an organization that we were going through a SWOT analysis and discussing some of the things that came up on the SWOT analysis. And what I heard back from the group was, yeah, I know this was brought up 6 times about pay within the organization, but that's not really important. We'll address that down the line. Or turnover. Turnover was brought up a number of times in the SWOT analysis. And the people that were participating were like, yeah, we don't think that's a big deal. So when you get to, those are big deals within an organization. There are certainly things that you have to address. So you got to be willing to ask those questions and be willing to listen to the responses. And then another key is, of course, producing that document that will be like your map, that will provide the guidelines to what it is that you want to do. And certainly, again, I'll keep harping on that implementation, because there's no point in creating a strategic plan if you're going to put it up on the shelf. And I facilitated strategic planning with some organizations. I'll admit it. I talked to them about implementation. I checked back with them in 6 months and to find out what they had done with their strategic plan and how it was going, and have found out they've done nothing. So I kind of felt like I fell there if they weren't actually implementing, but I can only, lead the horse to the water. I can't make him drink, as they say. So your vision, reviewing your vision statement during the strategic planning process really is about identifying what does success look like for your organization. So I've been in a lot of conversations about vision and mission, and there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the two, but the vision is the big audacious, hairy goal for your organization. If you do everything right, if you do your mission the way it's supposed to be done, what is it that your organization will have achieved? So here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, if we've done our mission well of supporting and helping to create sustainable, functioning nonprofit organizations, then every organization across the state of Kansas that's a nonprofit would be sustainable and offering everything that they can offer to be able to address the issues that go on in our communities. That's what it would look like. So I don't know what your visions look like, but you're always working towards that bigger vision. If your vision for your organization is to make sure that every child turns 18 and is literate and can read, that's a big vision. Your mission is going to tell you how, what is the work that you're going to do. So what does success look like? You have to have a discussion around what is it in your vision that you're really trying to achieve. And here's a few bullet points. The vision also describes where do you want to go? What do you want? What do you want your organization to be? What do you want the people that you serve to be? What do you want to be different about their lives? What kind of how do you want your community to be different? Maybe you're focused on something that has to do, with the community. And then the next thing that you're going to do is you want to kind of review during that strategic planning process, your mission, just a reminder of why you exist and what work it is that you're doing and why you're doing that work, making sure that that mission is still applicable to the organization. And certainly, if you're a newer organization, this probably is pretty much the same. If you've been around for 10 years, maybe what you're doing, maybe what's, your vision is, maybe what's important, maybe that has changed. So reviewing that mission, making any changes that you need to make during the strategic planning process is really important. And even if you don't make any changes to that mission statement during that time, just reviewing and having that reminder of why you do what you do is important during that process. So, your mission is really your reason for being. It's the reason that you exist. It communicates to the world what you do, why you're doing that work, who you want to impact. It is a little bit different from the goals or objectives. And it really helps you to balance the head and heart and inspire. So your reason for being, really having that discussion on who, what, where, when, why, and how your mission touches base with all of those different things. So, all right, we've reviewed our mission and we've reviewed our vision. And now we need to move forward with assessing the environment. And where are you at now? Where is it that you want to be? Not only where are you at, but what are other organizations doing? What are other people doing? How is the overall like pandemic? Pandemic changed our world a lot, right? It changed the way we offer services, the way we serve clients. There's so many different things. So really assessing all of that environment would be the next step. We're going to do that with a SWOT analysis. Everybody participated in a SWOT analysis at one point in time? Or anybody not participating in a SWOT analysis? Yvonne?
Yes, I
Yes.
participated in pretty much in everything we do, and not just as an organization, but personally on the projects that I've helped with.
Yes. Okay, very good. So there's a lot of different ways to do a SWOT analysis. I personally have developed a SWOT analysis when I do strategic planning with organizations. I've put together a SWOT analysis in the form of a survey, and then I send out on behalf of organizations that I'm working with, and we send it out. We send that SWOT analysis out, and we get feedback anonymously from anybody that organization wants feedback from, whether it be board members, whether it be staff, the executive director, clients. And I like doing the SWOT analysis that way for a couple of reasons. One is because it is anonymous, so people can be brutally honest. Another reason is it saves me time during the strategic planning process, because I've sat through strategic planning where we spent several hours going through the SWOT analysis. And I think sometimes people don't, and I know Keegan mentioned raising the heat. I think some people will not bring up certain concerns in the SWOT analysis when they're doing it in person because of raising the heat. And so that's how I do it. It could be done either way if you're facilitating that SWOT analysis. So your SWOT analysis is really going to look at the strengths of the organization. These are internal things, your strengths and weaknesses. So these are things about the organization that go on internally. And this allows you to look at where you're strong, where you're weak. So looking at what do you do well? What resources do you have? All the different resources. And I mentions here the knowledge, the reputation, skills, things. I think it also needs to look at, time, people, who do you have, that can actually do the work. See, I'm reading the chat. Yes. Yvonne says she loves the idea of doing the anonymous survey. It's interesting reading what the anonymous surveys will bring up, because I can tell you some of the things that I think have been brought up in that anonymous survey would have never brought up if we were doing the SWOT in person. And then you're going to look at your weaknesses. So where are you lacking? What things aren't working well, or not working right for your organization, aren't working well for your organization? Are your people overworked within your organization? Are they trying to do too many jobs? So what are you lacking? And I love that question about, do we have limited resources? Because I don't know of any nonprofit organization that doesn't have limited resources, even businesses. So what are those limited resources that an organization might have? And then you're going to look at, in the SWOT analysis, those external things that impact the work that you do. So what's going on in the world? What's changing? How's the industry changing in whatever you're, related to? I know if we were to look at what opportunities can we take advantage of right now, some of those external opportunities for some of us have been some of the CARES Act funding that have come about, the PPE program that came about. Certainly the opportunity to offer programming differently, because not everybody, but there's a lot of people who have become familiar with Zoom. That's something that's going on in the outside world. Looking at, is this need for services that you're offering growing? Is it declining? Which I think, can be better. And then what are the threats? Who's the competition out there? And despite what some people think, there's always competition. Doesn't matter if they're doing the exact same thing that you're doing or not. You always have competition. Let's see what Yvonne said. Partner with organizations who are doing what you want. Yes. So you're not reinventing the wheel. Yes. We at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber are a firm believer in collaborations and partnerships as well. So, and as I work with nonprofit startups, I am always saying, having them explore who are the competitors, who they might be competing with, because they're always going to, if nothing else, at the very least, we're all going to be competing for funding. So it's better to work together, right? It's better for organizations to work together. And then the other thing is, challenges, those external challenges that make it hard for us to do our work. How many of you found that a pandemic made it really hard for you to do your work? Anybody? Here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, let me tell you, we found it really hard to do our work, because suddenly, yes, Keegan says, yes, it got better. It got busier. And Audrey says, yes. Yeah, that threw a lot of challenges at nonprofit organizations. So doing a good SWOT analysis is the basis of moving forward and creating your strategic plan. Yvonne says, actually, we found that their services were definitely needed. Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, however you do that SWOT, it's just important to do a good, effective, in-depth SWOT and think about, again, who are the people that should be participating in that. And one of the other things about doing that SWOT analysis as an anonymous survey is that you can send it out to people that aren't going to actually participate in the strategic planning process, but still it's important to hear their voices of their perceptions about your organization. So and then a few other things about the SWOT. It is going to give you an opportunity to figure out how you can use those strengths or those weaknesses or any of those to take advantage of some of the opportunities that exist out there, or internally or externally. Yes, it's always good to ask the community, always. It's always good to listen to the community, and hopefully the community responds. I know in some of the things I'm involved with, that's a challenge that we've seen. How do we use our strengths to make us less vulnerable to threats? And how do we overcome the weaknesses that make us vulnerable to threats? So certainly thinking about all of those things as you go through your SWOT analysis is really important. I can tell you, as a facilitator for strategic planning, it's great that people respond and can anonymously to a survey to do the SWOT analysis. As a facilitator, though, I've had some situations come up that I had to figure out, how do I present the fact that somebody on the SWOT analysis said the executive director is horrible. because I have to bring those things out to the table because somebody said it, to have a discussion around that. So you also have to be prepared to have those tough discussions when you have that SWOT analysis and people are brutally honest about what they think. Back to raising the heat, Keegan. So the next thing that I think is important to do after you've conducted your SWOT analysis, to look certainly at those different things on your SWOT analysis, because we're going to explore what are the things that we really should address that came out on our SWOT analysis, going back to all the things that we could address. And, certainly we've heard feedback that the chairs at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber need to be replaced on our SWOT analysis. That's maybe going to fall in this low priority, low impact thing. But so going through your list of your SWOT analysis and identifying whether the things that have come out are things that are high priority or to address and are going to have a high impact, or if they're high priority to address that issue, but they're not going to have much of an impact, or whether they're low priority, but they might have a high impact, or whether they're low priority and have a low impact. So I like to take my people that I facilitate strategic planning with and take each of those things. And this takes a little while to go through putting these in the proper place. But we're going to set goals around whether or not these things are really high priority and high impact, whether they really have a huge impact on the programs and services that you're offering, whether it will have a high impact and it's very important to help the people that you're helping, the services that you're providing, those types of things. So this is, has any of you ever used, I call this a decision matrix. Have anybody ever used the decision matrix? Nope. Maybe somebody says in the chat. Yes, daily. Good for you, Keegan. I love the decision matrix. It really gives you an opportunity to look at and really think through what's really going to impact your organization or whether it's not so important. If your organization is struggling with becoming sustainable and the lack of funding is not allowing you to make payroll, then addressing that issue that came out in the SWOT analysis is probably going to be a high priority, high impact thing. But I think it's important for you to look through everything that you've brought up in that SWOT analysis to identify where they fall. Any questions about that? I hope I'm making myself clear. I don't know. Anyways. So we're going to use that information that we've come up with and whatever it was that we identified as high priority, high impact in your SWOT analysis after you've gone through this, whatever from that SWOT analysis has fallen in the high priority, high impact area, we're going to use that to set our SMART goals. And I generally recommend that our organization set 3 to 5 goals. If you set 10 goals or 12 goals or even 7 goals, it's a lot. It's a lot for an organization to try to do. And if you are just re-upping or just doing a strategic plan for the first time, it's going to be better to keep it simple. I like the keep it simple principle. But your SMART goals are really going to look at, everybody familiar with SMART goals? Maybe I don't have to explain this in depth. So they're going to be specific. to who, what, where, and how. Certainly, when you set a goal, you wanted a goal to be measurable. So you've got to be able to tell whether or not you're going to be able to measure that, whatever it is that you've set as a goal. And then you want to make sure that it is something that you can achieve. So if you want to increase your fundraising by $1 million in the next fiscal year, and for the last 10 years, you've only been raising 75,000, then $1 million might be pretty hard to reach. I don't know whether that's achievable or not. I guess it depends on who you have access to that has money. So, and then realistic, is it possible given our time and resources where you're going to raise that $1 million? Do you have more staff that can help you do that? Or are you a staff of 2 and the executive director's got to go out and figure out how to raise that additional $1 million? You've got to think about whether or not it's possible to do that. And then when are you going to do it by? So saying we're going to raise $1 million is so open-ended, because you're not going to, is that going to be over 10 years or 20 years, or when are you going to do that? So I have an example down here. Within 24 months, we will increase our funding by 10%. That's a SMART goal. And it identifies, well, hopefully it's a SMART goal, depending on whether or not it's possible and whether we have the resources to do it, but it's intended to be a SMART goal. All right, so I hear a lot of debate back and forth of goals versus strategies, also goals and objectives, but your goal really is the big purpose. It's the big thing that you really want to achieve. And again, it should be SMART. There's generally a long-term outcome of that goal, and it may or may not be easy to measure. That's a challenge that I have sometimes when doing strategic planning, but you do need to figure out some ways that you can measure whether or not you're achieving that goal. And I've got an example there. Within 24 months, we will increase our funding by 10%, which is the same one I had on the previous slide. And then the strategies that you're going to develop are really going to tell you how you're going to achieve those goals. You certainly can't develop a goal and not have a strategy for how you're going to achieve it. So that is a specific action designed to contribute to achieving that goal. So within 12 months, we will approach 25 potential major donors. And that is a strategy that would help you to achieve that. Within 24 months, we'll increase our funding by 10%. All right, so after you've set your goals, and I've got a worksheet I'm going to kind of show you in here what I use when I do strategic planning. The strategies really are going to help you identify what it is that you're going to do. What are the different ways? What are the things that you can implement that are going to help you achieve the goals that you need to achieve? I personally like an organization to have a good committee structure before we do strategic planning. It's not necessary, but the reason I like to do that is because often I find that when you look at a strategic plan and organizations have set goals, that those goals kind of align somewhat with some of the committee structure. So if your goal is to increase fundraising by 10%, that might be a good goal to assign the oversight of to your development committee. And they can certainly engage the rest of the board members in how that's done. But if the development committee, who's already doing that work, can help to define what are the strategies and tasks they could implement to increase that funding by 10% and be the lead on that, that works well. If you have a goal around increasing revenue in other ways, and the finance committee oversees that goal and develops the strategies and tasks, because they might be the ones that are doing a lot of that work, then I think it's good for them to have ownership of that. And then you have a committee that has ownership of a specific goal that they are working towards throughout the year, as opposed to trying to get the whole board to push the whole board and the committees and the staff or whatever to do that work. So the executive director's there helping to facilitate all that. But again, I think if you've got a committee that's specifically has ownership of that goal, it just helps to move things forward. Your strategies will also help you to define tasks, which are specific steps that you're going to be taking. And we're going to look at an action plan here in just a second. And then you'll also want to, as you create strategies, create that timeline, as well as identify who's going to be responsible for achieving what or doing what task. And that doesn't, all those things shouldn't necessarily fall on the executive director. It might be other staff, it might be particular board members. It just depends on the size of your organization and whether or not your organization has a working board or they're just a governing board. It's all contingent on all of that, but it's important to do. Yvonne says she's a PTA president. Yay! Oh, good. I'm glad that this will be beneficial. She says this will be beneficial with planning for the PTA, so I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so let's look at, so here's what I use when I do strategic planning. Here's what I use as an action plan. And I actually break down people by groups, and generally it's committees, but sometimes it's other groups. Once we've identified what the goals are that we want to achieve, and I give every group one of these action plans, and I try to group people together, again, whether it's committees or those people, if we've got a goal around achieving additional revenue, bringing in more revenue for the organization. I'm not talking about fundraising. I'm talking about other sources of revenue. Then I might put anybody that has an impact on creating revenue, whether it's, a program director, the finance person, the board treasurer, whatever, in that group, and let them really identify some of the strategies, capture those strategies, and for achieving that goal, the task, deciding who's going to be responsible, when they're going to complete it by, because and then they can check off when it's completed. Because again, this is about giving ownership to that group, as well as letting the people that are mostly going to do that work or have been doing that work identify what are some of the strategies that should be developed. Any questions about that? Thoughts? Other ways of doing it? Okay. Does this seem like a tool you could use? Maybe? Yes. Okay, yes. I love to give tools that you can use. All right. So again, implementing the plan, that ownership that I've given to people of those particular goals, to the ownership that I've given to the committees or whoever it is going to do that work, hopefully helps with implementing that plan. Again, with the whole goal being, we don't want to develop a plan that's not being implemented. Not only that, but if you've got committees or you've got a certain group that is taking ownership and overseeing that particular goal of the strategic plan, they can report back to the board. They can give updates at the board. They can give updates to staff, whatever. They're most familiar with that work. And then the other thing is that it is really good to, as you're developing an agenda for your board meeting, and I'm going to talk to you about doing board meetings a little bit different making the assumption that maybe you all do, well, I'm going to make the assumption that you all do the most effective board meetings that you can, but not all organizations do. So relating the board meeting agenda items to the goals of the organization or to the strategic plan is really important in implementing the plan. And I will tell you why. Yes, I love that, Yvonne. Yes. Wait, did I miss a slide? Hold on. Oh, I think I got 2 slides. I'm gonna go to this other slide, and then I'll come back to this one. So how do you take your strategic plan and use that in your board meetings? Well, so many organizations spend their board meetings talking about the program report and the finance report and the development report and the event report and whatever. And you find yourself going through a board meeting just talking about what all of these reports. And they're all reports that can be created, should be created prior to the board meeting, and every board member should have an opportunity to read those reports. And so if you find yourself doing that as a nonprofit organization, you can actually create more productive board meetings that help you stay on top of that strategic plan by not reporting out on all those different committees and what they've done, but using a consent agenda. Does anybody use a consent agenda? Yes, Jamie says yes. I would think that as government, you would use a consent agenda. Never heard of it. Yvonne says never heard of it. So, and I will send you a document about consent agendas. So the consent agenda allows you, when you're developing your board meeting agenda, to put all those reports and stuff that aren't really important to discuss. Those, the financials, the minutes, those can all be put on your consent agendas and approved by your board as a whole, or accepted and received and accepted through the use of the consent agenda. And some of you may say, oh, if we don't have all these reports on the programming and the development and everything to talk about at our board meetings, then what are we going to talk about? Well, you're going to talk about the things that are on your strategic plan. You're going to change your board meetings to where you're talking about things that are related to strategy and improving your organization and growing your organization that you don't ever talk about at your board meetings because you're busy talking about reports. You're busy listening to the executive director, the committees, or whatever talk about reports. So that's going to clear up time in your board meetings to talk about strategy, to talk about where you are in achieving those goals, what else you need to be doing, as opposed to just reporting out during your board meetings, which so many nonprofit organizations tend to do. So that's going to help you have that strategic plan in front of you all the time. Your committees or whoever can be overseeing their goal. They can be working on that goal. They can come back to the board and say, okay, here's the strategies that we've implemented. Here's where we're at with this process. Let's talk about it. Let's get feedback. So you're always working in strategy instead of just reporting out. Does anybody think that sounds maybe like makes a little bit more sense? So when that happens, you're going to make more progress on those goals on that strategic plan. Your board meetings will be more interesting and more engaging because the board members that are there really have input about something important. They're not just sitting and listening to report out. And I have to tell you, I serve on a board that the board meeting is 2 hours long. And I was just sitting thinking at the whole last board meeting that I was at, I sat there the whole time and just listened to the executive director report report every little detail of what he had done, report out. And I was asking myself at least halfway through, like, what am I doing here today? Anyways, that's not the most effective way to have a board meeting. And I'm on that particular board because I love the mission and what they do. But they're just not effective board meetings. Your board then can be able to provide more counsel, more direction about what you're doing, more input, and their opinions will mean something. And overall, your organization will be healthier. So we all want healthy organizations, right? I'm going back to this one slide that I skipped. I think I should have put it someplace else. So after you've got all that strategic plan done, it's important that you always monitor, you update that plan. Again, it is a living plan. So as you've achieved those tasks that have helped you achieve the strategies and you achieve those goals, look at what else that you need to add. And when I do strategic planning, I like for the organizations to have an idea of what else, and I put this in my report, what else was on that high priority, high impact list. Knowing that you can't do anything, there might be something from that list that you didn't set a goal around because you were limited to 3 to 5 that you then want to move to establishing a new goal around that. We just have to decide, what can we do with the resources that we have? But that's always a great list to go back to, especially if you're only going to conduct the strategic planning process, say, every 3 years. Certainly sharing the progress, not only with the board, but with the staff, with the stakeholders. I think that's important for them to have updates about, the progress that you're making. You've got to continue to review and revise that strategic plan and decide if you need to, back up and regroup. You need to go a different direction. Maybe you've tried a strategy didn't work. You need a new strategy. So those are some of the things moving forward that you need to just stay on top of. And then it says down here, your new strategic plan will help to guide you in the difficult decisions you have to make as a committee. It will help you to identify the activities that best fit with your vision, mission, goals, and objectives. I'm curious because this is the last slide that I have, but I'm curious about what steps maybe some of you could share if you are currently have strategic plans, you're working on strategic plans, you've had them in the past, maybe some of the things that you found that help you to implement and or update your strategic plans. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share around that?
I think in the past, working with other organizations, our strategic plan, one of the key identifiers in doing this was acting as a conduit between organizations and actually putting them in touch with what other organizations are doing the same work so that they can stretch their resources. Like there were 2 organizations doing food distribution. Both organizations covered the same area, but they also covered different areas. So we put them in touch with each other to find out how they could combine their services so that they were offsetting what the other did, and then reach the areas that were significant to their organizations. So it was like, if you're providing this and we're providing that, let's combine that so that it's done on one day and not 2 different days using gas, using human resources. Let's just put it together and say, we'll do this on this day, and we're distributing the food and the diapers, etc., on this day, instead of we'll do food on this day and this organization is doing diapers on that day. So it did alleviate double time, and it actually helped save money.
Yes, I can see that there is a lot of need for nonprofit organizations to figure out how to collaborate. I'd like to see everyone include somewhere in their strategic plan a strategy or something around collaboration and partnership. I know that we started here at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, and this might be something for, the North Central Regional Planning Commission to think about. We started cause collaboration conversations, and what we did is we brought organizations together. At that time, when we started them, we were bringing them together around a certain cause. So we tried to bring together all the organizations that did anything that impacted single women in poverty, to have a half day of learning about, and was facilitated by Kansas Leadership Center, to have a half day of getting to know one another, identifying what each other were doing, to really explore what got in the way of them collaborating and partnering, working together, to identify, the different factions that were related to providing service to those to the people that they served, and to walk away at the end of 4 hours with some ideas of how they could collaborate or partner, or do away with some of that crossover because they're working together more effectively. I think we've got more than 17,000 nonprofit organizations in the state of Kansas, and there's a lot of crossover. So how do we work better together? I think everybody should consider that in their strategic plan. Other ways that you all implement or think you could implement? Any concerns you have about implementation? I sometimes hear that as well. Nope. All right. So I went through that and I went through that. So this is your time to ask any questions or make any other comments that you want to ask. I have my contact information here. I certainly will be sending out the slides. I will also be sending the recording to Laura, and she can give you access to that as well. But what other questions, comments, needs do you have from me?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you ever do the Zoom meetups of organizations that you work with, so that, like you said, that they can, instead of getting everybody together in one room because of COVID, do you do Zooms where there is a consortium where nonprofits jump on, they introduce themselves, and gives everyone else an opportunity to do what you were suggesting, understand what they're doing, and find out how they can cross collaborate?
We will be doing that, though, some of those this year, and those are on our website. There's no charge to participate, and our website is ksnonprofitchamber.org. And we would love to get more organizations to participate in just having that discussion about who's doing what and where. And I don't know if you're familiar with, and hopefully it's okay for me to say, also, there's a platform called Unite Us. Is anybody familiar with Unite Us? It's a free platform that nonprofit organizations can sign up for, so others can learn, so nonprofit organizations can learn about what other nonprofit organizations are doing, and they can connect with referral resources for their clients. So if you're not familiar with it, there's no cost to be involved with it, no cost to sign up for that. So, and I will send out that action plan document as well. I think that came from Keegan. I'll send that out as well. Is there anything else that you all would like to have from me? That I'll send you out a couple of documents. I'll send you the consent agenda. I'll send you the action plan, and I'll send you the slides as well. If no other questions, I'll give you guys a few minutes back in your day to check some more emails or grab some lunch or whatever you would do in the next 15 minutes. And I appreciate you all allowing me to present on strategic planning. Again, if there's anything that I can ever do to help or tools or templates I can provide you, certainly let me know, and I'm happy to do so.